Hello again, gang. KR King here, welcoming one and all into 2022. You know, since my weekly video just happened to fall on New Year's Day, and I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do this year in terms of video topics and, other materials I'm thinking of creating and how I might be getting more input from you, my viewers, I thought I'd dedicate my video this week to talking about some of those new things. You know, doing this channel these past year and a half, I've learned a ton about, the YouTube channel and how to do that, and also the state of D&D, but also the game itself, because when you're explaining something, even something that you've played for 40 years and you think you know everything about, every time you make the effort to explain that thing, you learn more about it. So let's get right to it, because time is wasting, or as the band from my era, Kansas, used to say, time keeps on slipping into the future. All right, so basically what I'm going to do is talk about some of the topics that I'm going to be covering this year on the channel, and also some of my ideas about additional playing aids that I'm going to be providing, and also, ways that I'm going to be getting input from you, the viewer. And the first category is very obvious: world building, because pretty much my channel is dedicated to creating your own world and running it using the D&D system, in this case the 5e system, although I think a lot of my ideas are applicable to all. And it's been very interesting because I named this channel D&D Homebrew because in my era, among my group, we thought of homebrewing as creating your own world. And this became especially, the thing to do once TSR and then Wizards of the Coast began, providing campaign settings, the world of Greyhawk, Dark Suns, or Forgotten Realms. But, since I started this channel, I've come to realize a lot of players think of homebrewing as creating your own rules or modifying existing rules, to sort of have house rules for your game. Now, I have gone down and done the gamut of, all sorts of, modifying the rules and house rules and special classes and spells we made up, and we had a whole system of clerics, and I've done it all, but I'm not doing that this much on this channel for a couple of reasons. I've always found the best house rules are little tweaks of spells or, operational mechanics of the game, say, movement or rest or something like that. When you start to make major, rules changes, say, new classes or, all sorts of new spells, what I usually found out is they tended, because we didn't play test them, they tend to either be overpowered or underpowered, and most of the time, overpowered. And also these changes, these house rules weren't all, for our style of play, this sort of sandbox, homebrewed world, exploration and whatnot, maybe not as much role playing or something, but it was to our philosophy of play, and sometimes those, house rules didn't translate well. The other thing is, I have played in campaigns where the first thing they do is hand you a stack of their homebrewed, rules and say, you got to learn this. And even if you learn all these, homebrewed rules, you start to realize, they weren't play tested or they go against the spirit of the game. And what it makes you do is you really realize that the rules as written, the designers that made the rules kind of know what they're doing. So I'm going to stick with my concept of homebrewing as creating your own world, and, always consider the rules as written. But within that general concept of world building, I'm actually going to have a number of categories of things, topics that I didn't cover yet in my earlier videos, or topics that I did cover but I want to redo in what I call, more simplified detail. And simplified detail refers to advice I've gotten from some very experienced YouTubers who told me very kindly that when I'm offering up material, I'm making it very dense amount of material. I'm going very quickly. I'm, saying things that, need to be unpacked. I'm assuming all sorts of knowledge that may not be there. And since my fifth rule of, running a campaign is to keep it simple, my number one New Year's resolution this year is to try to simplify my presentation, to think about, somebody that isn't as familiar with the rules, how this presentation, how much comprehension they're going to have. And we'll see how successful I am at that, but that's my prime goal for 2022. For example, my first videos were, how to create an origin story for your campaign, drawing a complete continent, filling out the cities, creating a starting NPC, other NPCs, creating the first run for your players, and I did all that in like 5 videos. So I think I'm going to revisit some of those topics this year, and think about, in terms of like creating your origin story, really, what is the idea behind it? What are some of the premises that go into it before you actually start that process? And also with creating a map for your continent, how big, the scale, what kind of geography you might want, just in a little more, less dense style. Another thing I want to do is really talk in depth about creating NPCs for your players to interact with, whether as adversaries or allies. In the early editions of D&D, we could come up with NPCs very quickly. The character generation system was, pretty simple. But starting with the 3rd edition and on, the character stats became so crunchy with so many options that as a GM, trying to, create NPCs using all these rules and feats and all this stuff, that it became very complicated. And then running them, let's say 5 NPCs against 5 player characters, you're running all the NPCs. It became very complicated. Even if you had a sophisticated enough knowledge of the rule system, it's kind of a pain in the ass to run. Now, 5th edition, famously or infamously, has simplified things quite a bit, but still, just to come up with a group of NPCs on the fly, that's a tall order. And then running them again when you see a GM or you're doing it yourself and you're trying to run NPCs, it still can be tricky. So I really want to talk in depth about systems I've used to, create NPCs, typically offline, but it's not so that it's so complicated, and thinking about ways to run them in advance such that not only does it work in a battle situation, but you can then create, long-term, either adversarial or allied relations of the NPCs with your players. All right, so another thing that I want to try this year is live streaming. And this has been something that I have just avoided. Part of it is technology that I have, but also the thought that I have is, who's going to listen to me? Who really wants to go on there? And I don't really want to do a live stream and have no viewers. And all of this might be true, but I really enjoy watching the live streams of some of the YouTubers I've gotten to know and some of the ones that I've watched since the very beginning. So I'm determined to do some myself because you know what? Even if no one watches, which could be likely, I will learn something in this process, learning about talking. And because again, I want to interact more with my viewers, and this is, the most obvious way to do it. The thing is, when I first started this channel, I didn't even think anybody would watch. So of course, every viewer, every comment I love, anytime I realize I'm helping someone, it's great. When I first started watching these channels, I was teaching in Poland, and my wife was finishing off her job. I was there by myself, teaching at a university, and I started watching these YouTube channels, Nerdarchy and Matt Colville and some other ones, and I really enjoyed them. And the funny thing was, I really got into it because, one, I was kind of lonely, but two, it kind of reinvigorated my love of D&D. Now, the thing is, I knew nothing about the mechanics of making a YouTube channel. Just, again, the Nerdarchy guys, Matt Colville, those they kind of affected my style. My idea when I started was, hey, if I get, 10 people or 50 to stumble across my channel, have the same experience, be into it like I would, that'd be enough. And one of the ways to do that, one of the ways to interact, even if it is the 10 or 50 or, I don't know how many, 700 or something subscribers, which is nothing, but that chance to interact, I really want to try that. And this live stream concept, dovetails into the greater, idea that I want this year is to have that interaction. I really want to hear from viewers, what they're thinking about, what they want to hear about, the topics they want. So I'm going to do some surveys, I'm going to do some giveaways. As I'll mention, I'm going to do some reviews, that kind of thing, trying to get people to just tell me what they're thinking, what they like, what they don't like. I can take it. Some of my funnest videos have been inspired by comments from my viewers. Because the thing is, not only am I solving someone's problem or clarifying something for them, but I'm learning myself. And I've still got a bunch of those viewer-inspired videos waiting in the wings. I'm talking to you, Matt Nerdy. But I'd still love to hear more, get more ideas, and I'd love to learn more from that process. So another great thing that's going to happen this year is that I will finally be in a permanent home. As of the past 6 months, as I've said in some videos, I've been in the process of moving from LA back to the Midwest, and it's taken much longer than I wanted. The first 3 months, fixing up the house, getting it ready to sell, so I was doing videos out in my backyard. Then my work wanted me to stay longer. There was kind of an opportunity there, so I rented a condo. So then I did videos there. Now I'm back. I finally moved here, but of course I'm in this temporary location, which isn't permanent until I get a house. But the thing is, it's so exciting. I'm going to build a studio. I'm going to have an area for doing miniatures and board things and play the game in my setup here, my man cave, I guess it is. Now, of course, I also have to pick a house that has some features that my wife likes, like a kitchen or living spaces or, those kind of things. Normal people stuff. But I am super excited about the opportunity to build my YouTube studio, my gaming area. Because the thing is, as much as I loved LA all the years I lived there, space is expensive. So now I can expand my operations, and I'm looking forward to the grand opening video in a few months, I guess. And once I get that new studio and playing space, I want to cover a topic that is near and dear to my heart: miniatures. In my very first video on this channel, I explained my credo that playing D&D, you must use miniatures, because when you do theater of the mind, you lose so much in terms of the realism of battles. Now, of course, you don't have to use them if you don't want to, but I am here to tell you, you really have to use it. The thing is, I still have a smattering of miniatures compared to the 1,000 or something that I used to have. Part of this was they went away because the 80s, 90s after college, when I moved, left some of my parents' house, things got lost over the years. I played with a group. Everybody had tons of miniatures. It didn't matter. But now I want to get back into it. Not only do I want to take my old Rel Partha miniatures that I have left and paint them and whatnot, but I also want to get new ones, see what's out there. The other thing that I want to do is I want to get a battle map, lighted area, so we can talk about using a grease pencil and quickly creating an area for combat and using that map. Because here's the thing, I have spent many, many hours, with fighting monsters on the classic battle map with the grease pencil. It's a lot of fun. Another thing I want to do this year is more reviews. I did Volo's Guide to Ghosts. I also did a review of Matt Colville's online magazine, Arcadia. And I want to continue with, other supplements or materials, things like miniatures or game boards. And even though I use the 5th edition as the template for my discussions on this channel, I, love other systems, the old OSR ones, some of the alternatives. It'd be fun to go through those in enough detail to give a qualified review. And also to review 5th edition modules for tips that you can get out of them for homebrewing. I did this for the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It was really fun to go in there and look at how these designers created this mega dungeon, what the tips that you can take out of it in creating your own. The thing is, when you start playing D&D, you learn a lot from other players and the GMs that you play with in terms of creating your world. Well, why not learn from the experts at the Wizards of the Coast? And also along the lines of the playing aids that I want to create are some PDFs on, expanding on some of the topics that I covered in the video. I've been working on this one on natural treasures since I made that video, but it's very time consuming, and between work and other things, and then of course this whole moving process, I'm never able to finish it up to my standards, which, believe it or not, are pretty high. Once I settle into my new digs, I want to finish that one and do some more. I'm thinking on a set of charts to make NPC creation easier. I want to do one on sentient weapons. But, my biggest project that I've been working on and sort of developing is running a solo campaign. That's a campaign with 1 or 2 players. I did this for many years with an old college buddy, a couple old college friends, because our group had kind of split up. People got busy with, their careers and their families and whatnot. And we still wanted to run D&D, so I started running just one person, and I found it to be fascinating. Because it was different than the standard D&D, but different in sort of a heroic way. Like some of the books, Conan always wandered around by himself. So I actually wrote a script for a video on this topic, but of course, as I did it, I realized, there's so much information here, there's so much to talk about. Because you're changing the kind of the parameters of running D&D when you've just got one person there. I talk about having NPCs, but I also talk about thinking of ways in which a solo person could survive in the world of D&D, which means, changing things up a little bit. So I'm going to combine, a series of videos on this with a PDF that explains them in even greater detail. And coming very shortly is going to be my method to distribute these PDFs and other playing aids and things that I've come up with, which is to have a Patreon channel. And this, again, is something that I've resisted since starting this channel, because I'm just like, well, who would want to do that? Who would be that interested? But, other YouTubers, again, have said, look, just set it up, go for it. One guy said to me, you've got 40 plus years of experience playing D&D. Maybe that's worth something. So I'm setting that up, putting the different tiers on, doing some of the things, explaining what I'm going to be offering. Let's see what happens. And finally, I want to do more collaborative videos with other YouTube creators. I did a series of these with Fred Wheeler of How to D&D. I found it incredibly fun to do, made really good friends with Fred. There's some other channels out there I'm talking with and whatnot, so I really want to do that. Because the thing is, not only do you see other YouTube channels and D&D channels and think, oh, that's really good, but the chance to communicate with them and, you know, share ideas and, you know, get their input on D&D helps my game as much, I hope as much as it helps everyone else's. You know, because in the past you only got, you know, information or ideas from the people you played D&D with. You know, maybe you'd go to a gaming store or something, or convention, maybe read magazines. But now you can communicate digitally with people all over the world. And the collaboration provides me with so many ideas to creating videos. I can't wait to do more. So there you have my plans for D&D Homebrew in 2022. You know, I have to say, I'm having a blast making these videos and interacting with viewers and looking at your comments and getting ideas for the channels and learning about the greatest game ever invented, Dungeons and Dragons. So if you like what you've seen, please subscribe to my channel. I'm always looking for more. Please leave some comments. And of course, I can't wait to interact with you guys more this year. But most importantly, my friends, keep playing D&D and tell somebody else about it.